Have you ever noticed that the people who hurt you the most always expect you to react? They crave your anger. They feed off your explanations. What they truly want is proof that they still control your emotions. But what if the strongest response is silence? This video reveals the Stoic path to turning pain into power, without revenge, without confrontation. You'll learn how to walk away, not to punish them, but to free yourself. Because when you become emotionally unavailable, when your silence replaces reaction, that's when regret begins to haunt them. This isn't about getting even. It's about rising above. People don't fear your words, they fear your indifference. And by the end of this video, you'll see why the most powerful transformation requires no noise, just distance, direction, and discipline. So if you're tired of bleeding for people who never earned your loyalty, watch closely. Like the Stoics, we won't react. We'll rebuild. And if this message speaks to you, like this video, subscribe, and begin reclaiming your peace starting now.
Number 1.
Disengage and withdraw attention. There comes a moment in every person's life when they must make a decision. Not out of anger, but out of wisdom. The decision to stop giving energy to those who treat it as disposable. When someone disrespects, manipulates, or quietly drains your spirit, the default impulse is to react, to confront, to seek closure. But the Stoics knew. The loudest power is quiet. The most devastating move is to disappear, not with rage, but with clarity. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. This means your reaction is a choice, not a necessity. And the moment you choose not to respond, you've already won." Disengagement is not weakness, it is strategy. It is the recognition that not every attack deserves a defense, and not every insult requires explanation. When you step away, not to punish, but to preserve, you begin to reclaim something far more valuable than revenge: your peace. In a world obsessed with response, your silence becomes thunder. The one who hurt you expected a scene. They anticipated backlash. What they never expected was indifference. And that is where the real shift begins. You no longer serve as their emotional mirror. You stop playing the role they cast you in. Instead, you step off the stage entirely. And that absence echoes. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." When you disengage without bitterness, when you walk away not because you lost, but because you've outgrown the game, you elevate. They stay behind in the drama. You rise above it in discipline. And here's the key. Your withdrawal must be clean, not dramatic, not noisy, no vague online posts, no cryptic final words. Just distance, just stillness. Because if they know you're still watching, still hoping, still hurting, they still hold a string. But when you cut every line of emotional access, you don't just confuse them. You starve them. You take away the very thing they fed on. Your reaction. Even in our modern world, this Stoic principle lives on. Maya Angelou, after a traumatic event in her childhood, went silent for years, not out of fear, but deep reflection. In that space of silence, she rebuilt, not by arguing or explaining, but by cultivating strength within. Her eventual voice was not shaped by performance. It was forged in the fire of her own quiet discipline. Her rise was not an act of retaliation. It was an act of transformation. And consider Steve Jobs, fired from his own company, humiliated publicly, underestimated globally. He didn't go on a tour to explain or justify. He vanished. And in that retreat he created, years later, when he returned, not with bitterness, but with brilliance, his very existence silenced every critic. You must remember, not everyone deserves access to your emotions. Access is earned, And once violated, it should be revoked without negotiation. Your silence is not just the absence of noise, it's the re-establishment of standards. You are not walking away from them, you are walking back to your values. So ask yourself, why are you still trying to be heard by people committed to misunderstanding you? Why are you bleeding for those who laughed when you were in pain? The Stoics give us a simpler path, one that requires no performance, no revenge, just withdrawal, deliberate, complete, and calm. Let them feel your absence. Let them taste the silence they created. And while they look for your reaction, let them find nothing, because in that nothingness is everything. Power, control, peace. Disengage, withdraw, not to hurt them, but to return to yourself. And by the time they regret what they did, you will already be too far ahead to hear it.
Number 2.
Build in darkness. Once you've disengaged, the silence you create becomes a sacred space. But here's where most people go wrong. They waste that silence waiting to be missed, waiting to be called, waiting for validation that never comes. That's not transformation, that's limbo. What the Stoics teach is this: use the silence not to wait, but to work, not to ache, but to awaken. Seneca once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. And the biggest waste of all is pain that isn't converted. Pain, when held without purpose, becomes poison, but when used wisely, it becomes fuel. And this is your task. Take the emotional fuel that was meant to burn you and use it to build something stronger, something deeper, something they never saw coming." This stage isn't glamorous. It's quiet. It's private. It happens in early mornings, late nights, and moments of deep self-honesty. While others gossip, you grow. While they question your silence, you're laying bricks on your mind, your body, your path. You're not building to prove them wrong. That's petty. You're building to prove to yourself that they never had the power they thought they did, that your value was never up for their approval. Marcus Aurelius never ranted publicly about his struggles. He didn't scream for sympathy. Instead, he journaled, quietly, intentionally, privately. Those meditations, written in solitude, later became one of the most enduring works of philosophy in history. Why? Because he built in darkness. He didn't react to the world. He responded to himself. The Stoic path is not reactive. It's creative. You take your solitude and make it sacred. You use every ounce of betrayal as a lesson, every ounce of disappointment as material. You rebuild yourself brick by brick in silence, not for applause, but for alignment. And here's the hard truth. No one will see your progress at first. They're not supposed to. A seed does not sprout in the spotlight. It takes root underground. Think of J.K. Rowling. Before her books changed the world, she was broke, anonymous, and nearly hopeless. But in that darkness, she wrote, not to impress, but to express, not to get back at anyone, but to give everything she had to what she believed in. That is the difference between healing and performance. One grows roots, the other seeks reactions. And if you need proof of this principle in real time, look at the greatest creators, thinkers, and leaders. They retreat before they rise. Whether it's a sabbatical, a season of solitude, or the silence after heartbreak, their greatness is forged in invisibility. You're not falling behind. You're simply laying foundations they cannot see. In your own darkness, do not reach for noise. Do not try to be seen too soon. Protect the process. Let your growth be hidden long enough to harden. Let your excellence mature in solitude until it becomes too undeniable to ignore. Because when you're ready, you won't need to explain where you've been. Your progress will speak louder than any apology they never gave. This is why the Stoics prize discipline over display. What you build in silence becomes your armor. What you refine in solitude becomes your clarity. And when you emerge, you do not emerge with vengeance. You emerge with vision, calm, clear, unshakable. So stop rehearsing your comebacks and start preparing your comeback. Build quietly, strengthen privately, rise slowly, and let those who wrote you off learn the hard way. It was never your noise that made you powerful. It was your ability to grow where they thought you'd wither. Build in darkness, not for them, for you. Because someday soon, your results will cast a light so bright, they'll have no choice but to see you differently. But by then, you'll no longer need their eyes. You'll be too focused on your next level.
Number 3.
Forgive, but never forget. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood concepts in emotional healing. Many see it as weakness, as letting someone off the hook, or even inviting them back into your life. But from a Stoic lens, forgiveness is not about the other person. It is about freedom. Your freedom, forgiveness, to the Stoic, is not sentimental, it's strategic. You don't forgive because they deserve peace. You forgive because you do. Seneca put it plainly, to be angry is to revenge the faults of others upon ourselves. Every moment you spend reliving what they did, rehearsing arguments in your mind, or holding bitterness in your chest, you are choosing to remain connected to their chaos. And this is what Stoicism warns us against: entanglement. The true act of power is detachment, not pretending the hurt never happened, but refusing to let it define your present. However, there's a crucial balance here. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. That's not wisdom. That's recklessness. The Stoic doesn't erase. They remember, but they remember differently. They remember not to nurse the pain, but to guard the boundary. What harmed you yesterday becomes your armor today. If you allow the memory to mature into insight, to forget would be to leave the door open for history to repeat itself. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor, faced constant betrayal within his inner circle. But he didn't let resentment cloud his mind. Instead, he reminded himself in his private journals, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." That's what forgiveness looks like for a Stoic. Not passivity, but power. You rise without retaliation, you grow without asking for recognition, and you protect yourself not with hate, but with clarity. There's a powerful modern example in Nelson Mandela. After 27 years of imprisonment, he forgave his captors, but make no mistake, he never forgot what was done. He remembered, and he used that memory as the blueprint to rebuild a fractured nation. That is what real strength looks like: to hold pain without being held by it, to carry memory without carrying malice. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think forgiveness means reconnection, but the Stoic knows better. Forgiveness ends with release, not reunion. You let go of the poison, but you don't drink from that cup again. You can bless someone from afar. You can wish them well and never speak to them again. And that silence, that boundary, becomes your declaration of self-respect. But make no mistake, this kind of forgiveness doesn't come quickly. It's not performative. It's not a motivational quote. It's a slow burn, a quiet process, a difficult but sacred unraveling of your attachment to what can't be changed. The Stoics would tell you, focus on what's in your control. You can't force an apology, you can't edit the past, but you can decide how much real estate they occupy in your mind. So forgive, not because they asked, not because they're sorry, but because you're tired of carrying weight that was never yours to begin with. Forgive to clear the room for peace, for joy, for forward motion, and never forget, not to hold a grudge, but to hold your ground. Your memory becomes your boundary. Your boundary becomes your strength. And one day when they try to circle back, when they want access to the version of you that no longer exists, you won't feel rage, you won't feel pity, you'll feel nothing, not because you forgot, but because you've healed. Forgiveness didn't soften you, it refined you, and your silence will speak louder than any apology they were too late to give.
Number 4.
Let your results be your revenge. Revenge is tempting, it whispers to your pride. It tells you that justice means making them feel what they made you feel, that your power lies in your ability to strike back. But the Stoics saw this differently. They believed that true strength doesn't scream, it builds, it doesn't argue, it ascends. And the most devastating response to disrespect is not retaliation, it's reinvention. Epictetus put it clearly, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. In other words, don't waste your time proving your worth through words, live it, become it, because when your results speak, no one can silence them. No slander, no rumor, no manipulation can survive in the face of undeniable evidence. The people who hurt you are not your audience anymore. Your own becoming is. When you stop performing and start producing, the entire energy shifts. You stop chasing recognition and begin pursuing mastery. And that's the key difference between revenge and results. Revenge is reactive, it's emotional, it needs them to watch, but results are sovereign. Results don't need an audience. They bloom in silence, and then, one day, they're too radiant to ignore. Marcus Aurelius led not with noise, but with character. When those around him tried to corrupt the empire or sabotage his reforms, he didn't argue for his greatness. He lived it. His reign became his message. He didn't entertain petty challenges because he knew that real excellence doesn't answer to insult. It simply outlasts it. Think about Oprah Winfrey again. She was publicly humiliated, underestimated, told she didn't belong, but she didn't fire back with bitterness. She built, her work ethic was her weapon, her discipline was her shield. And over time, her success didn't just prove her right, it erased the legitimacy of those who ever doubted her. That's the art of letting your results speak. But this path requires patience, quiet consistency. You won't get applause at first, you won't be understood, but you will be building something no one can take from you, a foundation so stable that when they look back, they won't recognize the person they tried to break. Not because you became someone else, but because you became fully you. Here's the trap to avoid. Do not let spite fuel your journey. That's ego in disguise. If your success depends on them watching, you're still chained to their opinion. That's not power, that's dependence. Stoicism reminds us to act from inner purpose, not outer noise. Build not to be seen, build because it is who you are becoming. Ryan Holiday, a modern Stoic writer, talks about this often, that the best revenge is not revenge, it's clarity. It's no longer being affected, it's no longer caring whether they ever acknowledge you. Because the truth is, your peace speaks louder than any comeback ever could. And here's the deeper Stoic truth. If your results are truly rooted in virtue, then even their silence becomes irrelevant. You no longer need recognition. You've already become what they said you couldn't. That alone is enough. So while they mock, you meditate. While they watch, you work. While they doubt, you develop. And one day when your name is spoken, it will not be with ridicule. It will be with respect. Not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. And when they come back around, searching for the old version of you, the one who explained, defended, overextended, you'll be gone. Not physically, but spiritually. You'll have risen beyond the need to be understood, because your life, your results, your transformation will say everything. Let your results be your revenge, not to punish them, but to liberate yourself, because nothing shatters false narratives like undeniable success. And when it's built in silence, it doesn't just echo, it roars.
Number 5.
Master the art of indifference. There's a point on the healing journey where silence is no longer just a tool. It becomes a way of being. Not because you've grown cold, but because you've grown clear. When you've seen enough, been drained enough, and misunderstood enough, you stop wasting words, you start filtering energy. And that's where the Stoic virtue of indifference is born. Not out of bitterness, but out of discipline. The Stoics never told us to feel nothing. They told us to master what we feel. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That strength doesn't look like confrontation. It looks like composure. It's the power to walk away from an argument without needing the last word. The ability to hear gossip and feel nothing because you finally understood. Not every opinion deserves a seat at your emotional table. To master the art of indifference is to break your addiction to being liked, understood, or validated. It's to return home to yourself and decide, I don't need their applause to move forward. I don't need their version of the story to feel whole. And I definitely don't need to bleed in public just to prove that I've healed. This doesn't mean you shut down. It means you elevate. You become emotionally selective. You stop giving your light to people who are committed to dimming it. Indifference is not silence dipped in resentment. It's silence rooted in self-respect. You're not pretending not to care. You've simply realized that caring about the wrong things costs too much. Eleanor Roosevelt embodied this principle. She was criticized relentlessly by the press, by politicians, even by her own circle. But she never responded in kind. She moved with grace. She didn't chase rebuttals. She didn't explain her worth. She lived it. And her legacy proves this truth. When you stop reacting, you start becoming. Her words still echo. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And that is Stoic clarity in its purest form. But make no mistake, this path isn't easy. It takes time to deprogram your need for reaction. You've been taught that silence is weakness, that indifference is cold. But what if it's wisdom? What if it's protection? What if it's the only way to stop bleeding for people who never offered you a bandage? The Stoics remind us constantly, external noise is just that. Noise. You don't owe anyone an emotional performance. You don't need to explain the boundaries they chose to cross. When you stop explaining and start embodying, everything changes. Your peace becomes louder than your words. Your presence becomes heavier than their judgment. And here's what happens next. People begin to test you. They will poke, prod, bait. They'll say you've changed, that you've grown distant, that you don't care. Let them, because your silence is not absence. It's alignment. It means you're no longer playing roles that drained you. It means your peace is now your priority, not their perception. Indifference, when mastered, is not coldness. It's warmth, preserved. It's the decision to keep your inner fire from being used to light someone else's chaos. And that choice, that refusal to be emotionally hijacked, is a revolution in itself. So let them talk, let them guess, let them misunderstand. And you, stay still, stay focused, stay unavailable to drama. Because the moment they realize they can no longer get a reaction from you is the moment they understand they've lost access. Master the art of indifference not as a wall, but as a window to a clearer, calmer, more sovereign version of yourself. Because when you finally stop caring about what doesn't matter, everything that does becomes sharp, sacred, and yours alone. Number 6, let progress speak louder than pain. The people who hurt you expect one thing, your collapse. They expect silence to mean defeat. They expect their betrayal to echo louder than your recovery. But the most powerful thing you can do is rise. Not with noise, not with revenge, but with quiet, relentless progress. The kind of progress that doesn't announce itself. It simply becomes undeniable. Stoicism teaches us that pain is not a punishment. It is a signal, Marcus Aurelius wrote. What stands in the way becomes the way. In other words, the obstacle is not in your path. The obstacle is the path. What was meant to break you is now the very thing that can build you. If you let it, pain, when approached with discipline, becomes a compass that redirects you back to what truly matters. Progress doesn't always look like a dramatic return. Sometimes it looks like choosing not to text them, choosing not to scroll through their life, choosing to pour your energy back into your health, your craft, your mind, choosing again and again to stop living in reaction and start living in intention. That is real progress, not performance, but presence. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." The pain you continue to relive in your mind, the betrayal, the disrespect, the abandonment, it holds you hostage until you decide to build instead of bleed. The Stoic response isn't to numb the pain, it's to use it, to treat it like a sculptor treats stone, cutting away everything that doesn't belong to the person you're becoming. Maya Angelou is a living embodiment of this. After deep trauma and years of silence, she didn't let the world define her. She redefined herself through poetry, through education, through fierce elegance. She didn't use her pain to seek pity. She used it to give voice to others who had none. She once said, "We may encounter many defeats, but we must not be defeated." That's not just poetry, that's Stoic resilience. But here's where it gets powerful. Those who hurt you expect you to stay loud in your wounds. They expect anger. They expect chaos. So when you respond with calm progress, you do something radical. You confuse them. You shift the narrative. You remove their access not just to your life, but to your emotional space. They no longer know who you are because you're no longer shaped by what they did. Progress becomes your protest, your silence becomes your statement, and your discipline becomes your defense. You don't erase the past, you outgrow it. And when someone asks what happened, you don't need to explain. You evolved. You left that version of yourself behind, along with anyone who mistook your presence for permission. This doesn't mean you pretend you're unaffected. It means you choose not to let your wounds lead. You feel, you heal, and then you move, because real healing isn't a performance. It's a pattern. It's in the way you get up every morning and show up for yourself, even when no one's watching. And here's the paradox. The more progress you make, the less attention you need, because healing doesn't make you louder, it makes you quieter, more precise, more grounded. You stop proving and start becoming. You no longer care if they notice, because you've already seen what you needed to see, and that vision alone is enough. So let your progress speak. Let your peace be the loudest thing in the room. Let your calm be the evidence. Let those who once wounded you watch from the shadows, if they're watching at all, not because you need their attention, but because you finally stopped needing their permission. You are no longer living to be understood. You're living to be whole. And that is the loudest thing you'll ever say. Number 7, make your disconnection complete. There is a difference between walking away and truly being gone. Most people leave the room, but leave the door slightly open. They stop talking, but keep checking. They don't text anymore, but they still wait. That's not healing, that's hesitation. And the Stoic path does not tolerate half steps when it comes to peace. You either detach fully or remain quietly enslaved. Epictetus wrote, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. If you are still hoping they'll come to their senses, still waiting for an apology, still seeking validation from the very person who disregarded you, then you are still under their influence. And that is not freedom, that is emotional limbo." True disconnection begins when you realize They don't have to understand what they did for you to be done. They don't have to apologize for you to release the story. Your healing is not dependent on their realization. It is dependent on your decision. You stop trying to win. You stop trying to explain. You stop looking for signs. And instead, you begin to reclaim the parts of you that were once built around their opinion. This kind of disconnection isn't dramatic. It doesn't come with a final message or a symbolic goodbye. It's subtle, it's quiet, but it's complete. Like Marcus Aurelius, who endured betrayal from those closest to him, he didn't waste time correcting the record. He didn't campaign to be understood. He turned inward. He wrote to himself. Not to control the narrative, but to control the one thing that mattered, his own mind. The Stoics didn't teach us to seek closure from others. They taught us to become the closure. You don't need them to finish the sentence. You end it yourself, with a period, with clarity, with finality, because real strength is not in the goodbye. It's in never needing to return. And in the modern world, we see this embodied in those who master emotional boundaries. Think of Michelle Obama, criticized, misunderstood, targeted, yet she rarely reacted. Why? Because her presence wasn't up for public negotiation. She stayed grounded in her values. She chose dignity over drama. That's what full disconnection looks like. Not escape, but embodiment. Not silence from pain, but silence from power. But here's the hard truth. As long as you still mentally rehearse what you'd say to them, you're still in it. As long as you're checking their status, wondering if they noticed your absence, you're still feeding the story. Disconnection becomes real when you no longer need them to notice your distance for it to matter. When your absence becomes about you, not about them. And let's be honest, it's tempting to leave the door cracked, to hold space for what ifs. But that sliver of hope, that quiet obsession, is what keeps you stuck. The Stoics would tell you, close the door, not with hatred, but with clarity, not with anger, but with discipline, and then walk away, not to be chased, but to be free. Because once your disconnection is complete, you no longer flinch when their name comes up. You no longer check who's watching. You stop building your growth around the idea of being seen. You start becoming someone who doesn't need to be noticed to feel whole. So make your disconnection complete, emotionally, energetically, spiritually. Remove the hooks. Let go of the mental rehearsals. Burn the scripts you've outgrown, because the moment you stop needing them to make it right is the moment you finally make it right with yourself. And when they notice the silence, if they ever do, it will be too late. You won't be the one who left. You'll be the one who outgrew the entire story. You don't need to beg for peace. You just need to stop giving it away. In the end, the people who hurt you will not be silenced by your arguments. They'll be silenced by your absence. By the way you no longer flinch when their name comes up. By the fact that your life moved on and they were not invited. This isn't about revenge. It's about resurrection. And your resurrection doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be real. Stoicism doesn't ask you to become numb. It asks you to become unshakable. It asks you to guard your mind the way you guard your home, fiercely, unapologetically, with intention. So disconnect, rebuild, withdraw your energy, not to punish, but to purify. Make your peace louder than your pain, and let those who once underestimated you realize they lost access to something sacred. If this video gave you clarity, gave you strength, or reminded you of who you really are, then don't forget to subscribe, share it with someone walking the same road, and remember, your silence, your boundaries, your growth are the loudest things you'll ever say.